Democracy is a fragile thing, more fragile than you want to believe. If the election fails, there is no democracy. I don't have to do anything. You're doing it to yourselves.
The world's most isolated dictatorship holds a weapon that forces even superpowers to tread carefully. A regime that rules with an iron fist, one of the most oppressive in modern history, now stands defiant, armed with one of the most feared arsenals in modern warfare. But how? How did North Korea, a country with barely enough resources to feed its own people, develop nuclear weapons capable of striking the United States? And more importantly, why? The answer is not just in weapons, but in power. The North Korean regime doesn't just seek survival, it seeks absolute control. Its nuclear arsenal is not about conquest. It's about ensuring that no foreign power, no enemy state, no uprising from within can threaten the dictatorship. And the story of how this brutal regime built the bomb is a lesson in deception, resilience, and ruthless strategy. To understand North Korea's nuclear obsession, we must first understand its greatest fear: losing control. The Korean War of 1950-1953 was not just a battle between two sides. It was a war that nearly erased North Korea from existence. By the time the armistice was signed, Pyongyang was in ruins. US bombers had reduced the country to rubble, entire cities flattened, industries wiped out. The message was clear: without the right weapons, North Korea would always be vulnerable. The war never officially ended. To this day, there is no peace treaty, only a fragile ceasefire. And in Pyongyang's mind, the threat never disappeared. The US still has thousands of troops in South Korea. The South, backed by American firepower, remains an existential threat. And the North Korean leadership, knowing its rule is built on fear and absolute authority, understood one thing: if it wanted to survive, it needed the ultimate deterrent. Saddam Hussein had no nuclear weapons. He was overthrown, captured, and hanged. Gaddafi gave up his nuclear program in exchange for diplomatic recognition. He was later dragged through the streets and executed. But what about nuclear-armed nations? North Korea saw a pattern. The Soviet Union, despite its collapse, was never invaded. China, despite tensions with the West, remained untouched. Pakistan, despite internal instability, was never overthrown. Why? Because they had nuclear weapons. Because no one dares attack a country that can retaliate with nuclear firepower. For North Korea's ruling elite, nuclear weapons weren't just about protecting the nation. They were about protecting themselves. North Korea's journey to nuclear power began in the 1960s under Kim Il-sung, the founder of the dynasty that still rules today. The Soviet Union provided early assistance, giving Pyongyang its first research reactor. But Moscow wouldn't hand over nuclear weapons. They saw North Korea as a useful ally, but not as an equal partner in the nuclear club. That left North Korea with only one option: steal, develop, and manipulate its way to nuclear power. For decades, Pyongyang played a dangerous game, acquiring nuclear technology through espionage, black market deals, and deception. They purchased missile designs from the Soviet Union. They studied nuclear programs from Pakistan. They took advantage of the black market, obtaining uranium enrichment technology from rogue scientists. Every negotiation, every diplomatic meeting, every deal was a smokescreen. They promised disarmament, they signed agreements, they received economic aid, but behind the scenes, the nuclear program never stopped. Even as North Korea's economy collapsed in the 1990s, even as millions of its people starved in a devastating famine, the dictatorship funneled resources into nuclear research. For Pyongyang's ruling elite, the bomb was not just a weapon, it was a guarantee that no foreign power could remove them from power. And today, that gamble has paid off. North Korea, once a weak and isolated dictatorship, now holds a nuclear arsenal capable of reaching the United States. A regime built on control, suppression, and ruthless calculation has become one of the most dangerous players in global politics, and the world has no choice but to take it seriously. North Korea had the knowledge, it had the strategy, but building a nuclear arsenal wasn't enough. The next challenge, testing it, refining it, and using it as a weapon of diplomacy. From the mountains of North Korea to the halls of the United Nations, Pyongyang played a game of deception and defiance, mastering the art of survival through provocation and control. And when the world told North Korea to stop, it detonated the bomb. The world watched in horror, knowing that North Korea had crossed a line, a calculated risk that would reverberate across continents. Diplomacy turned to desperation as nations scrambled to react, each move dictated by the specter of nuclear power looming over global peace. The first nuclear test came in 2006, a low-yield detonation. Primitive but undeniable. North Korea was no longer developing nuclear weapons. It had them. The world reacted with outrage, sanctions, condemnations, warnings of consequences. But to Pyongyang, this was nothing new. 2009, another test, stronger, more advanced. 2013, another. 2016, twice. Each time, the bomb grew more powerful. Each time, North Korea proved it could withstand economic pressure, international threats, and even internal collapse. The message was clear. North Korea would not be stopped. While the world debated how to respond, Pyongyang was perfecting its technology, moving from atomic bombs to hydrogen bombs. And in 2017, the world saw its worst fear realized. The detonation shook the international community to its core, igniting fears of an impending conflict. For the first time, North Korea tested an intercontinental ballistic missile. It wasn't just about having a nuclear bomb anymore. Now they could deliver it anywhere. Los Angeles, Washington, Tokyo, Seoul, every major city within range. The world was no longer dealing with a regional threat. It was dealing with a global one. A nuclear arsenal is only as valuable as its reach, and Pyongyang made sure the world knew exactly how far it could strike. But North Korea didn't just build these weapons to use them. They built them to wield power. Every missile test was a bargaining chip. Every nuclear threat was a tool of negotiation. One moment Pyongyang threatened total war, the next they invited world leaders to the table. North Korea mastered the cycle. Threaten destruction, force negotiations, win concessions, food, fuel, money, break the deal, repeat. Again and again, world powers fell for the same trap. 1994. The US made a deal, North Korea got aid, then broke the agreement. 2005. A new deal, more aid, more deception. 2018. Another historic meeting, but the weapons never disappeared. North Korea had learned a lesson. A country with nuclear weapons is not just feared, it is respected. And as long as they held the bomb, no one could touch them. But there's a hidden cost to North Korea's nuclear obsession. While the government pours billions into missile tests, its people live in poverty. Food shortages, power outages, entire regions cut off from the modern world. The regime tells its people that nuclear weapons are the only path to safety. But behind the propaganda, how much longer can this fragile system survive? North Korea is no longer just a rogue state. It is a nuclear state. The world underestimated them once. It may never get the chance again. A dictatorship armed with nuclear firepower, a nation that defies the world and gets away with it. North Korea's nuclear arsenal isn't just about survival. It's about leverage, power, intimidation, and the ability to manipulate global politics. For decades, the world has tried to stop North Korea's nuclear ambitions. Diplomatic talks, economic sanctions, military pressure. Nothing worked. Why? Because North Korea has mastered the game of survival. They don't just build nuclear weapons, they weaponize fear. As the world holds its breath, one question lingers. What happens when fear meets desperation? The stakes couldn't be higher. And if the next test isn't just a warning, but an attack? What happens then? North Korea doesn't need to use its nuclear weapons to make them effective. Just having them is enough. Every time Pyongyang launches a missile test, the world reacts. Stock markets shake, diplomats scramble, Military forces go on high alert. And North Korea, it watches, it calculates, it plays the long game. They promise peace, only to break the deal. They enter negotiations, only to demand more. They use nuclear weapons, not just for deterrence, but for blackmail. Give us aid, or we escalate, ease the sanctions, or we test another missile. For North Korea, nuclear weapons aren't just defense, they're a tool of manipulation. So why hasn't the world stopped North Korea? Why haven't military strikes, sanctions, or diplomacy worked? Because Pyongyang has learned from history. They saw what happened to Saddam Hussein. They saw what happened to Gaddafi, and they swore never to disarm. And unlike other rogue states, North Korea has a trump card: China. China doesn't want North Korea to collapse. A collapsed North Korea means millions of refugees flooding into China. A collapsed North Korea means US forces moving closer to China's borders. And so, despite North Korea's defiance, despite its threats, despite its brutality, China keeps it alive. Food, fuel, trade, lifelines that prevent total economic collapse. North Korea may be isolated, but it's never truly alone. This is where the danger lies. North Korea doesn't need to launch a nuclear strike to start a war. One mistake, one miscalculation, one provocation too far. That's all it takes. The world has faced nuclear standoffs before. The US and the Soviet Union came seconds away from nuclear war. Now imagine that tension, but in a dictatorship, where one man holds all the power. No checks, no balances, no second opinions. If Kim Jong-Un believes his rule is in danger, would he hesitate? If the regime is collapsing from within, would it launch a desperate strike? One nuclear launch, one counterattack, and the world changes forever. The Korean War never ended. The ceasefire signed in 1953 was not peace. It was just a pause. And as long as North Korea holds nuclear weapons, as long as it remains a dictatorship willing to gamble with global stability, the world is one mistake away from disaster. The question is not if North Korea's nuclear gamble will backfire. It's when.
Is it not hard for democracy to collapse? All you have to do is nothing.